My name is Laurel Voss. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my life, have been the family's footnote. Not the failure. Not the black sheep. Just the one nobody bothered to finish a sentence about. My older sister got the sentences. She got the paragraphs, the standing ovations, the refrigerator door, and the family group chat notifications that made my mom actually pick up her phone mid-dinner. I got the occasional "Laurel's doing fine" tossed into a conversation like a receipt nobody needed to keep. This past Thanksgiving, my family decided to host the dinner at my sister's house for the first time. Her husband had just gotten a bonus at his architecture firm, and they'd redone the kitchen with this massive island and pendant lights that my mom described to me over the phone for 11 minutes straight. 11 minutes on pendant lights. She did not once ask what I was doing that fall. 3 weeks before that call, I had quietly signed paperwork that would change everything about what my life looked like. She didn't know. None of them did. I sat in the passenger seat of my own car. My friend Declan drove because I was too keyed up, staring at the bare November trees along my sister's street and thinking about all the ways this dinner was going to go exactly like every other one before it. My brother-in-law would make some comment about my apartment. My mom would talk about my sister's kids like they were national treasures. My dad would ask me how the teaching thing was going, then glaze over before I finished answering. And my sister would smile that particular smile she had. Not unkind, just distracted, the way you smile at a stranger's dog. What none of them knew was that the teaching thing had become something that a company in Boston had just paid me $50,000 to own. I want to tell you how we got there. Because it matters. The before matters as much as the after. And I'm tired of stories that skip straight to the number. I became a middle school science teacher at 24 because I genuinely loved it. Not as a fallback, not because I was scared of something bigger. I loved the specific chaos of a room full of 12-year-olds the moment an experiment actually worked. I loved the way their whole faces changed. My sister became a marketing director at a firm downtown at 26, got married at 28, had 2 kids by 30, and my parents treated her trajectory like a nature documentary they got to narrate in real time. Me, they treated like a steady weather pattern. Mild. Predictable. Not worth watching. About 4 years into teaching, I started noticing a problem that nobody was solving. My school used 5 different platforms for assignments, communication, parent updates, and testing. None of them talked to each other. Teachers were drowning in administrative noise. Parents were confused. Kids were falling through gaps that existed purely because the tools were a mess. So I started sketching out something during my lunch breaks. First on the back of old quiz papers, then in a notebook I kept in my tote bag, then after months of talking it through with my friend Petra, who did software development in actual code, Petra and I built a platform we called ClearBridge. It was a unified classroom management tool that pulled everything into one dashboard: assignments, communication threads, progress tracking, flagging for kids who were slipping. It was designed by someone who had actually stood at the front of a classroom for 4 years and knew exactly where teachers lost time and where parents lost trust. I did not tell my family I was building it, partly because I tried once early on and my dad had said, "That sounds complicated, honey. Don't let it distract you from your actual job." My mom had nodded and pivoted to telling me that my sister's firm had just landed a huge retail account, partly because I had learned, a long time ago, that protecting something while it's still fragile sometimes means keeping it away from people who don't know how to hold it carefully. So I kept teaching. I kept building. Petra and I did calls on Sunday mornings. I graded papers at night and debugged error logs after midnight. I ran a pilot at my school with permission from my principal, and the feedback was so strong that we got picked up as a district-wide trial the following semester. Word spread. An education technology company based in Boston reached out in the spring. By summer, we were in serious conversations. By early October, Petra and I had signed, after fees, after taxes, after Petra's share, which I want to say clearly was significant and fair because she built this with me from nothing. I cleared just over $400,000. It was not private jet money. It was not, I never have to think about money again, money. But it was the kind of money that rewrites your options, quietly and completely. It was the kind of money that meant I could stop calculating whether I could afford to get my brakes fixed. That was real. That was mine. I didn't tell my family. I paid off my student loans and sat with the silence of that for about a week. Then Thanksgiving arrived. Declan dropped me off at the curb because he had his own family thing to get to. I stood outside my sister's house for a moment. It was genuinely beautiful. I'll give her that, the kind of house that looks warm from outside in November, and I made myself a quiet deal. I wasn't going in there to perform gratitude for an invitation to my own family dinner. I wasn't going to make myself small to fill the space they'd assigned me, and if someone handed me the opening, I was going to take it. Inside, the smell hit me first. Roasting turkey, something with brown butter, candles with names like Harvest Spice that cost more than my electric bill. My mom was already at the island arranging a cheese board with the focus she reserves for things she considers important. She looked up when I came in. "Laurel, finally, did you take the highway? The traffic has been terrible. Your sister made 3 different sides from scratch, can you believe it?" She said it like a compliment directed at someone else in the same room. "Go say hi to your father. He's in the living room with the kids." My brother-in-law, who is actually fine as a person when he's not doing this thing, drifted in from somewhere and shook my hand. Firm grip, like we were business contacts. "Laurel, good to see you." "Still at the school?" "Still at the school," I said. "Good for you," he said in the tone people use for community service. My sister came out of the kitchen in an apron, cheeks pink from the oven. She hugged me with one arm and the other holding a wooden spoon. "You look tired. Are you sleeping okay? You should try that magnesium thing I texted you about." I had not received a text about magnesium. I let it go. My dad was in the living room with my niece and nephew running laps around the coffee table. He stood up when he saw me, hugged me properly, which I'll give him. "There she is! How's the teaching thing treating you? You look thin. Are they feeding you at that school?" "They have a cafeteria, Dad." Right. He was already glancing toward the sound of my brother-in-law's voice from the kitchen. "Your sister really outdid herself with this house. You seen the kitchen? The island alone, 11 minutes of pendant lights," I said. He laughed like he thought I was kidding. Dinner came together the way these things do. The specific choreography of a family that has been doing this long enough to have assigned roles without ever saying them out loud. My sister orchestrated. My mom assisted and narrated. My brother-in-law opened wine and held court from the head of the table. My dad laughed at his jokes. I carried dishes and cut the kids' turkey into pieces and poured water for everyone because it gave me something to do that wasn't sitting still and absorbing the ambient message that I was the supporting cast. When we finally sat down, my dad lifted his glass. "To family," he said, which is what he always said. Then he added, "And to this house. You two have really built something here. We couldn't be prouder." My sister smiled. My brother-in-law made some modest noise. My mom said, Here. I raised my glass. I had learned a long time ago to raise my glass because the alternative was making a scene and I wasn't ready to make a scene. Not yet. The conversation ran its usual course. My brother-in-law's bonus, my sister's campaign that had just won some industry award, my nephew's soccer team, my niece's ballet recital, the kitchen renovation, the possibility of a trip to Portugal in the spring. I was asked at one point whether I had anything fun coming up, the way you ask a child if they're excited about summer. "It's been a busy fall," I said. "A lot of things wrapping up." My mom nodded without quite looking at me and refilled my brother-in-law's water glass. The opening came from my brother-in-law. I want to say I planned for it, but honestly, I just knew it was coming because it always came in some form. He had this habit of landing compliments on my sister by throwing an elbow in my direction. He didn't mean it as malice. He just didn't know what else to do with me. "You know," he said, leaning back with his wine, "your sister was saying you've been doing some kind of side project? An app or something?" He said it the way you might say someone had taken up scrapbooking. That's great, Laurel. Good to have hobbies that keep you creative. Teaching can get repetitive, I imagine. I set my fork down. I did it quietly, the way I had learned to do things quietly when I wanted people to actually hear what came next. It's not a hobby, I said. ClearBridge. It's a classroom management platform. Petra and I built it over the past 3 years. My brother-in-law nodded like he was being polite. Right, right. And have you got users, or is it still more of a concept? It's been adopted district-wide in 2 school systems, I said, and an education technology company in Boston acquired it about 6 weeks ago. The table didn't go silent all at once. It was more like a sound got swallowed. My sister paused mid-reach for the bread, my mom's hand stilled on her napkin. Acquired, my brother-in-law repeated, and I could see him doing math he didn't have the numbers for yet. What does that mean, acquired? Like they bought the rights to it? They bought the company, I said. Petra and I sold ClearBridge. My mom said, Honey, when did this happen? Beginning of October. My dad looked up from his plate. He had a particular expression he used for things that didn't fit his categories. And good. Is that good? It's very good, I said. My brother-in-law had the particular look of a man recalibrating. So what are we talking? They paid you what does something like that go for? A small ed tech thing. The word small did it. Not in an angry way. More the way a key turns in a lock. 850,000, I said. That was the acquisition price. After Petra's share and fees and taxes, I cleared just over 400. The silence this time was total. My sister put the bread down. My mom's hand went to her collarbone, which she does when she doesn't know what to say. My dad made a sound that wasn't quite a word. My brother-in-law stared at me like I had said something in another language that he almost recognized. My sister started. Laurel. That's real, I said. It's real. I have a multi-year consulting agreement with the acquiring company, and they're expanding ClearBridge into 3 additional districts next year. My brother-in-law recovered first, which I expected. He had the instincts of a person who processes new information through the lens of what it means for him. Why didn't you say anything? He looked at my sister, not at me like she might explain me. We didn't even know. Did you know? Of course I didn't know, my sister said, and she looked at me with something I hadn't quite seen on her face before. Not jealousy, something more complicated than that. My mom found her voice. Laurel, sweetheart, why wouldn't you tell us? We're your family. Something this big, I tried, I said. Dad, do you remember 2 years ago at Easter when I told you Petra and I had just gotten our first district pilot approved? My dad's brow furrowed. I don't. You said that's great, honey, and then you asked my brother-in-law if he'd seen the game. I was mid-sentence. The table was quiet. I'm not saying that to hurt you, I said, and I meant it. I'm saying it because you asked why I didn't tell you, and the answer is that I did. Multiple times. You just weren't listening for it. My sister looked at her husband. Something passed between them that I wasn't meant to catch. You could have pushed harder, my mom said softly, but with that specific inflection she uses when she's redirecting blame. If it was important, you could have made us listen. There it was. I had been waiting for it, and there it was. 400,000, 20 years of being the afterthought in the room, and somehow the problem was still my communication skills. Making you listen, I said slowly, has never been something I've been able to do. You have a very clear picture of who I am, and new information doesn't update it. It just gets filed away under Laurel's fine. My brother-in-law shifted in his chair. That's not fair. We care about you. We've always been interested in what you're doing. You asked me if teaching gets repetitive, I said, tonight, an hour ago, and then you called my company a hobby. He didn't have an answer for that. My dad cleared his throat. Laurel, His voice had gone quieter. I think we're all just surprised. This is a lot to absorb. I know, I said. I absorbed it alone in my car for about an hour before I could even drive home, so I get that it takes a minute. My sister made a sound then. Not quite a laugh, not quite a cry. She put her hand over her mouth and then took it away. I'm proud of you, she said. I want you to know I'm saying that even though it's coming out weird, I'm proud of you, and I didn't know this was happening, and I'm trying to figure out how I feel about both of those things at the same time. That was probably the most honest thing my sister had ever said to me at a dinner table. I looked at her for a moment. That's actually the right thing to say. My mom started to cry, which complicated things. My mom's crying always complicated things because it redirected the room toward her, and I was not in the mood to comfort her for a reaction she was having to my news. I just don't understand, she said, pressing her napkin to her face, why you kept this from us. Don't you trust us? Don't you feel like we're your family? I trust you, I said, but trust isn't the same as expecting people to pay attention. I didn't tell you because the last several times I tried to talk about Clearbridge, you changed the subject, not cruelly, just automatically. Like the signal I was sending didn't register on the frequency you were tuned to. My dad made a low noise and looked at the table. My brother-in-law poured himself more wine. You always seemed fine, my mom said, and her voice cracked on the word. You've always seemed like you had everything handled. Your sister needed more support with the kids, with the transition to the new role. We were trying to be there for the people who needed it. And I needed it too, I said simply. I just never had a breakdown in front of you, so you assumed I didn't. That landed. I could see it on all four of their faces, the small flinch of recognition. And for what it's worth, I said, I'm not telling you this to make anyone feel guilty. I'm telling you because I built something and it succeeded, and I'm done being the person in this family who waits to be asked. I'm going to take up space now. You can adjust to that or you can't, but I'm not waiting anymore to find out. My niece chose that moment to ask for more cranberry sauce, and the table exhaled around her. The drive home. I called Declan to come get me. I wasn't in the state to drive, was quiet in the good way. Not the hollow kind of quiet. The kind that happens after something big has been said and can't be unsaid, and you're not sure yet if that's terrifying or relief, and then slowly you realize it's the relief you were afraid of. Declan didn't ask too many questions. He handed me his aux cord and let me pick the music, which is the correct thing to do for someone who has just detonated a dinner. In the following weeks, my family did what families do. They regrouped. My mom called me twice, both times opening with, I've been thinking about what you said, and both times ending the call in a better place than we'd started. My dad sent me a text, just one, short, not his natural habitat, that said, I looked up Clearbridge. It's impressive. I should have looked it up years ago. I'm sorry I didn't ask more questions. I read it 4 times. My sister was the most interesting one to watch. She called me about 10 days after Thanksgiving on a Sunday afternoon and asked if she could come over. She showed up with coffee and without her kids, which meant she'd actually planned this. She sat at my kitchen table and said, Can I be honest with you without you thinking I'm a terrible person? Always, I said. I think, she said carefully, that I benefited from you staying quiet, not on purpose. But I never had to think about it because you never pushed back, and that was comfortable for me. And that's not okay, and I'm sorry for my part in it. I didn't melt, because this wasn't a movie. But I sat with it, and I told her it meant something. And it did. My brother-in-law took a little longer. He's the kind of person who processes things through action rather than conversation, so what he did was email me an article about EdTech acquisitions about 3 weeks later with a note that said, thought you might find this relevant, which, from him, was the equivalent of a formal apology with a handwritten card. I eventually set some terms for how things were going to go, not as an ultimatum, more as a matter of fact. I told my mom that I wasn't going to be the person they called when they needed help navigating something I had more money for. I told her that if that changed, If Clearbridge gave me the kind of resources to do something meaningful for the family, I'd do it because I wanted to, not because they expected it. I told her that I needed them to ask me questions about my work the way they asked about my sister's campaigns, and I needed them to actually stay in the room for the answer. She listened. She said she would try. I want to say something about Petra, because I think it matters. Petra was there from the very first rough sketch. She took calls with me at 7 in the morning and at 11 at night. She debugged things I didn't understand and explained them until I did. When the acquisition came through, she cried before I did. Her share of that deal was real and significant and right, and I want anyone watching this to know that the best version of building something often looks like building it with someone who believes in it as much as you do. Find your Petra. Protect your Petra. Pay your Petra. There's something they don't tell you about finally being seen by people who have spent years looking past you. It doesn't feel triumphant exactly. It feels quieter than that. More like relief with a lot of complicated feelings stitched into it. There's still the grief of the years when they weren't looking. That doesn't dissolve because the numbers showed up and made it impossible to ignore. But here is what I know now that I didn't know before I walked into that Thanksgiving dinner. Being overlooked doesn't mean you're not building something. Sometimes it means the opposite. When nobody is watching, you don't build for applause. You build because the problem is real and the solution is needed, and you were apparently the person willing to do it at midnight after a full day of work. That's not a consolation prize. That's the whole thing. My worth was not created the day a company in Boston wrote a check. It existed in every lunch break I spent sketching dashboards instead of eating. It existed in every district coordinator who told me Clearbridge was the first tool that made them feel like the system was actually designed for teachers. It existed in the kids who stopped falling through gaps. Not because their teachers stopped caring, but because their teachers could finally see them clearly. The check just made my family stop scrolling long enough to look up. They're looking now. I'm choosing to believe they'll keep it up, and if they don't, I'll be okay. I know how to build things in the dark. Our team at Revenge Heat creates original, fictional stories exploring the emotional experiences of everyday people navigating family dynamics, personal achievement, and self-worth. All characters and situations are invented for storytelling purposes, with the goal of reflecting on themes of fairness, recognition, and the quiet resilience of people who keep going without an audience. We hope these stories remind you that your efforts count, even before anyone else notices them. I've thought a lot about what actually made that Thanksgiving dinner turn out the way it did. Not the money. Not the number I said out loud at the table. The thing that made it possible was the 4 years before it. The lunch breaks, the Sunday morning calls with Petra, the nights I chose the notebook over the TV. Cause came first. Effect followed. That's not inspiration. That's just how it works, and I think we do people a disservice when we lead with the outcome and skip the accumulation. There's a version of this story where I get bitter, where I spend those 4 years keeping score, cataloging every moment my brother-in-law called Clearbridge a hobby, every time my mom redirected a conversation back to my sister's campaign wins. I could have done that. Some days I came close, but bitterness is expensive in a way that doesn't show up on any bill until you're so far in debt to it that you can't think clearly anymore. And I needed to think clearly. I was building something that required all of me, not the version of me that was still relitigating dinner tables from 3 years ago. What I chose instead, and I want to be honest, it was a choice, not a gift I was born with, was to put my attention where it could actually do something. I chose to stay in the real problem, chaotic staffing, missed handoffs, kids falling through gaps because the tools weren't built for the people using them. That problem was solvable. My family's perception of me was not through argument anyway. So I solved the one I could and let time handle the other. I think about Petra a lot when I talk about this. Petra believed in Clearbridge before there was anything to believe in. Before the pilot, before the district adoption, when it was still a rough concept, I was explaining badly at 7 in the morning. That kind of person, someone who sees the thing before it exists and shows up anyway, that's not luck. That's the direct result of years of showing up for other people consistently enough that they decide you're worth showing up for. You build that through your word, meaning what you say, through doing the work even when nobody is keeping track. Cause and effect, again. The hardest part of that Thanksgiving, looking back, wasn't the moment at the table. It was the drive home, sitting in Declan's passenger seat, feeling the relief and the grief at the same time. Relief that I'd finally taken up space. Grief for all the years I'd made myself smaller because it was easier than dealing with the blank look on my mom's face when I said the word dashboard. Both things were real. I didn't have to choose between them. Resilience isn't the absence of grief. It's the ability to carry it without letting it drive. My family is different now. Not fixed. Families don't fix. They shift. Slowly, like something geological, but different. My dad texts me about ed tech articles. My sister comes over without her kids sometimes, which means she planned it. My brother-in-law still processes things sideways, but he tries. That change didn't happen because I showed them a number. It happened because I finally stopped arranging myself around their comfort and let the truth of what I'd built stand on its own. The number was just the thing that made looking away impossible. The work was the point. If I could give anything to someone watching us who feels like they're building in the dark, with nobody paying attention, it would be this. The attention was never the fuel. The problem was the fuel. Stay in the problem. Do the work so well that eventually the results speak at a volume your family can't talk over. And find your Petra. The rest tends to follow.